we're gonna get both sides of this too, because so like the Mormons aren't going to be pissed because AJ is Mormon, and so they can't be pissed at the podcast, and the people who want to make fun of Mormons are going to enjoy it as well. So it's going to be great.
Sure. Did you hear what the internet says that we can or can't do?
Yeah, so this is what the internet says that Mormons can do: no sex before marriage.
Well, how's that Mormon? I mean, Catholics can't. Christians can't. Jews can't.
And complete fidelity after marriage.
I'm pretty sure it's all religions.
Yep, I can't cheat on my wife. That's true.
No alcohol or drugs.
No alcohol. Yes.
Welcome to Drunk Real Estate.
Grab a drink and enjoy the show.
Hey there, and welcome to episode 20 of Drunk Real Estate. I am Kyle Wilson, Ashley Wilson's husband, and again, I'm joined on location at BiggerPockets by my lovely co-host. How's it going, guys?
It is going good.
How you guys doing?
We'll start with Jay over there on location in Orlando. How's it going there?
We're having a great time. AJ, you spoke yesterday, right?
Yep, spoke yesterday. So did you?
Yep, I did a few sessions yesterday. AJ spoke yesterday, and today we're both trying to enjoy the show.
Yes.
Yeah, did you? Is there any alcohol there? You just find a drink for us?
So, little story. Like 10 minutes before we're starting to record, AJ and I are walking back to my condo, and AJ's like, I'm kind of thirsty. And I'm like, oh, shit, I'm supposed to have something to drink also. So we're running through, this is the JW Marriott attached to the Ritz-Carlton. So maybe two of the nicest hotel conference centers in like all of Orlando. And there isn't a single bar that's open. There isn't a single store, it looks like, that you can obviously buy alcohol or beverages. Like we literally had to walk through two hotels to find a place where we could buy a soda and some alcohol.
There's nothing.
There's no bar open at 2 p.m. I'm glad I didn't come.
No bar open at 2 p.m. It was nuts. So what am I drinking today? Well, I found a little bodega, and this is what jumped out at me.
No, you're not drinking that.
I am drinking this.
What is that?
For those who are not watching this, it is called Boyd and Blair Craft Cocktails. It's a little plastic bottle, 200 milliliters. 30 proof, 15% alcohol by volume, vodka with cranberry, pomegranate, and lime. So here's the discussion AJ and I were having about this thing. What do you think this is equivalent to? Like, is this a half a drink? Is this 5 drinks?
That's a glass of wine right there. It's 15% alcohol.
Okay.
The whole thing is?
The whole thing?
Well, pour it into a wine glass. See how much it is. It seems like it. 200 milliliters. That's a glass of wine.
Oh, wine's only like, I thought wine was like 8 or 9%.
No, wine's like 12. It's like 12. It depends, but it's like 12%. Yeah, it's not. If that was hard alcohol, I would have paid you $100 just to chug that whole thing right now. But if it's like wine, then screw it.
Well,
We obviously don't.
This was the best thing I could find. So I will report back at the end of this episode.
I want you to drink that though. I want you to drink straight from the bottle though. No, nothing. 100%. Just like
They're totally lying. It is like pure concentrated alcohol, and you're going to be falling over.
Just drink half of it right now.
Can you also find? I want you to find a brown paper bag too to wrap around the outside of it, just to keep it authentic.
I got one. This is what I was walking around with.
There you go. Wrap it in there. AJ, did you find a Monster or a Diet Coke or anything?
So I found this wonderful Celsius peach vibe. Do
you like it?
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's not too shabby. So as far as it's pretty concentrated. I think we've got like a lot of caffeine in here. I think 150 milligrams. So it's like a Monster, but not the same fluid ounces. So.
Yeah, they have it right next to Monster. So all the time, if I'm grabbing an energy drink, I'm like Celsius. Well, I don't know. Maybe I'll try that.
This is all they have here, and we were lucky to even find this.
Yeah, keep it on the metric system. Mauricio, how's it going over there? You're pretty early right now.
I've got major FOMO though. I wish I was in Orlando with those guys. I was supposed to be there, and last minute had to bail. And it just looks like you guys are having a good time. Getting no work done over there, obviously, but I'm jealous. Wish I was there. I don't even have. I was gonna look at. First of all, it's like 9 o'clock in the morning out here, but. So I don't even have, I was going to show you my water, but I don't even have water left. Like I'm scouring the office to see if I could find some more liquid. So I'm going I'm gonna be thirsty this whole episode. So anyway, I'll
If
drink the
you
rest
think
of
it's
mine.
9 o'clock in the morning out there, I think you need to reset your clock.
Yeah, it's 11. That's 11 a.m. can be lunchtime. It's a little
It's
afternoon
11. It's
delight.
11:30.
I've been up too much.
He
All right.
just
Anyway,
woke up, so it's 9 o'clock. He just woke up.
I know. I just woke up. For me, it's like 9 a.m. I just rolled out of bed, and you know me, I like to sleep in.
Well, I was kind of with Mauricio here, being too early to drink. But then I did some research on the economic updates and stuff like that, and I was like, "Fuck, I need a drink." So, I went fruity this time though. I went and grabbed one of the clear bottles, but I got the berry lemonade, and it's 6.5% alcohol, so it should get me there by the end of the episode.
We'll see.
So,
We always know by the hat. So, by the way, did you see my? By the way, real quick. So we need to give away. We need to give away one of your books, Jay. We need to give away one of the books for the first person who comments at what point of the video, if you're watching this on YouTube, does Kyle's cap tilt to the right? If you can identify the first time it tilts in the episode, then you're going to get a free book by Jay Scott.
That's how we know he's drunk.
I wonder what percentage that is. So if you were to take a breathalyzer, at what point at the test does that shift? That'd be a good indicator. Kyle's step away from the car. You can't drive.
gonna reset my hat right now so it's nice and comfortable, so that it's a fair.
I have a rule that I will not drive after taking even a sip of alcohol, but I will let you know where in this episode I think, not where I wouldn't drive, because I wouldn't drive even at this point, but where I think it would be dangerous for me to drive.
Well, that's the problem though, is you can't start driving and then the alcohol that you just drank hits you later. So that's why you can't. There's no buzzed driving, as they say. Anyway, we're gonna get in trouble talking about this. So let's move on. I know everyone has been begging for an economic update. So who am I to deny the people what they want? We had CPI, PPI come out. Treasuries are still banana lands. As I said, I don't know what's going on. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I don't know what's going on, and I don't think the government knows what's going on either, which scares me even more. So Jay, why don't you give us an update here?
So I'm supposed to know what's going on? Okay, so we've had a lot of economic news over the last couple of weeks. We haven't talked about much. There hasn't been a Fed meeting a Fed rate meeting for the last month and a half. There's one coming, 2 weeks from 2 weeks from tomorrow, I think. And so, yeah, what have we seen? It has been a completely mixed bag. And when I say that, I kind of mean that we don't know if things are getting better, things are getting worse, things are staying the same. Big report last week, monthly CPI report that everybody was kind of waiting on. They thought that would clarify things, but it just muddied things even more. What we saw was 0.4% regular CPI growth, which was a little bit higher than they were expecting. It drove the 12-month average up to 3.7. It had gotten down to about 3.1 at some point, I think. So we're definitely up over the last couple months. But the number, that 0.4 number, isn't horrendously bad, given that a lot of it is energy costs. Energy costs are through the roof. Housing costs are through the roof. That was a surprise last week that we saw housing numbers up a whole lot.
It's not surprising when they make up numbers.
I don't want to say made up, but certainly
they're made up. At this point, they have to be made up. Let's be honest. We've been on the ground here for it's been almost a year right now, where there's been no rent growth, and many places did whole episodes on it where it's been negative, and yet the CPI comes out, and all of a sudden, that's what's driving inflation is the housing costs. It's made up. The numbers are made up. We have this owner's equivalent rent that's going on, that's based on surveys, that's based off of all these, they're making stuff up at this point.
I'm gonna be more optimistic and say that it's not made up. It's not necessarily good data. It's not necessarily the right metrics to be looking at. I could be wrong, but I'm not yet ready to admit that the government's just making up data. I'm not far from it, but I'm not yet ready to admit that they're just making.
To Kyle's look, listen. Wait. To Kyle's point, though. To Kyle's point, this is a good test. Everybody who's listening to this podcast who owns a home, Off the top of your head, do you know what your home would rent for if you decided to put it on the market today without going and Googling it, without going to look at Zillow? Do you have any idea what your house would rent for? Because that's what people are getting a call for and saying, hey, how much would you be able to rent your house right now if you had to? And they're like, I don't know, $7,000 or $5,000 or $4,000. Like, nobody knows, right?
Yeah, and that's different than making up data. I mean, that's bad data. It's people not knowing. Maybe it's the people making up the data, not the government. I'm not saying it's good data, but regardless, even with housing and energy kind of going through the roof last month, we saw CPI data, inflation, kind of just tick up a little bit. So is that good news? Is that bad news? If we look at the core, which strips out food and energy, which are two really highly volatile parts of CPI, we went up 0.3 last month versus 0.2 the month before. Now, again, not a horrible number, but not a great number. Even though core doesn't necessarily measure energy costs or the rise or fall of energy costs, all the other stuff that go into the inflation number, like just commodities, things you buy every day, they're going to cost more if energy prices are up because you got to transport them around the world. You have to build them, and so machines that make these things cost more to run when energy costs are higher. So energy is impacting a lot of things, but even when you strip out energy, we're kind of in a we don't know where things are going right now. Now, that said, the big news that we can talk about today is that just this morning we saw retail sales numbers for September come out. And retail sales kind of measures what the velocity of spending is for consumers on regular everyday goods. And that number this morning came up super, super high, a lot higher. We expected a 0.3% growth month over month. It was 0.7. Like literally consumers are spending a ridiculous amount of money still, despite debt being through the roof, despite credit crunch, despite everything that's going on. Apparently consumers haven't gotten the news that they shouldn't be spending a ton of money. Now, you would think that's good for businesses. I mean, anytime people are spending lots of money, you'd think that's good for businesses, but it turns out it's going to be really bad for businesses because what we saw today was after that number was released, I think that kind of spooked investors thinking, oh, what the Fed's doing with raising interest rates isn't working. We're not actually quashing inflation at this point because people are still spending. So now everybody's concerned that this is going to lead to more rate hikes, and basically the 10-year Treasury shot up to over 4.8%.
Well, and that's why, like, a lot of people don't understand. They're like, I don't understand why when we get these job numbers like we did, which were twice what was expected,
Yep.
and when we get these consumers, why is that a bad thing? Like, why does the stock market tank? Why is everybody, like, all the business owners like, oh no? And it's not because of the numbers, it's because of, like, what you're just mentioning, the reaction to the numbers that the government's going to do. Because once again, in order to stop inflation, you have to stop demand, and the Fed actually wants unemployment to go up. They want people to stop spending. So what worries it is we're at whatever that interest rate is. You want to go borrow to get a home, it's 8%. We're almost 10 years is floating between 4.5 and 5. It's the largest jump that we've seen in our lifetime. Well, that's not stopping it. So then that makes everybody go, like even Kyle was saying, what's going on here? And everybody's going, what are they going to have to do? It's not working. And the reaction that everybody's worried about from the government may be very severe to other parts of the entire economy to try to get this under control, because the plan laid out, it's not working.
Yeah. And the problem that businesses are going to have is, again, people spending lots of money is good. But what people don't realize is that spending money is going to lead to higher interest rates for longer. Mm-hmm. And what businesses really care about is their borrowing costs, their ability to keep borrowing money to keep operations going. And the reality is that in the next few months, through the end of 2023, businesses are going to see about $230 billion worth of debt come due. In 2024, there's going to be another $790 billion. So that's over $1 trillion in through 2024 of debt coming through for businesses, and that's going to be another 1.1 trillion in 2025. So we're looking at about $2.1 trillion in debt coming due for businesses in the next 2 years. These are businesses that were borrowing money a couple years ago at 2%, 3%, 4%, And now they're going to have to refinance that debt or reborrow at costs that are significantly higher because interest rates are up. And this is going to lead.
But what percentage of our economy is actually like businesses are actually borrowing money and are affected by this? Because like if you want to look at the actual breakdown, like it's like less than 20% are actually affected by this. No, so hear me out here. So of our GDP, like our economy, so over 50% is just government and healthcare, right? So that's over half right there, and they're not affected. It's not like all of a sudden, I was going to go get heart surgery, but I'm not going to now because interest rates are 5%, and the government's not being affected by that. The government's 30-something% of it, so that's half of it right there. And then if you look at all of we're already half the pie. Only half of those people are really affected by the interest rates and having to borrow money off of this stuff. So like when we're saying, okay, what do we have to do? Like what is this really affecting?
But the problem with healthcare is when you look at healthcare makes no money on providing healthcare. It's all on electives. So basically all the hospital system, everything else, they make money on elective surgeries. That's why COVID decimated the healthcare sector. So because of COVID, hospitals shut down elective surgeries, and they were bleeding. So all of a sudden, all the hospitals were laying people off. They were getting emergency funds to try to even stay afloat because of those elective surgeries. Now, when you look at Americans in general, everything, but when you're looking at inflation, the borrowing cost, healthcare is so astronomically expensive to administer. A lot of people don't realize the impacts in America of us doing what we're doing, right? And the borrowing cost to buy an MRI machine, to do all these things are extreme. These are huge, huge numbers for these people. So you start to get weighing elective surgeries like you did in COVID, that swing is massive. You stop reinvesting into core things within the business, and the people that you have to pay are really high paid people. So your cash flow problems in healthcare are very, very large. So the government, yeah, you're right, no. But the moment businesses start to get hurt, guess what they cut back on? Health insurance. It's the number 2 largest expense of businesses outside salaries. So the number one thing everybody starts cutting back on is healthcare. And the healthcare benefits that are affected in elective surgeries are always the first to go. So we're no longer going to provide you with, your ability to go get whatever it is, your braces and all that kind of stuff. They start cutting all that stuff back.
But all this stuff that you're saying, like I think you're equating like interest rate hikes to a recession. Like the thing that you're basically saying when business are having it rough, and when when people need to cut back, and when doing all that stuff, all of the data that we're seeing, nobody's cutting back. Nobody's reducing their spending. Nobody's doing like nothing's getting cut back. We're not in a recessionary time. People aren't like cutting back their spending. So like who are these interest rates actually affecting then?
It all goes back to jobs. And at the end of the day, as long as businesses are performing well, and in this case, businesses are performing well. I mean, consumer spending was up 0.7%. If you look at the S&P 500, companies in the S&P 500 have 10% more cash on hand than they did a year ago. They're in a good cash position. So right now, businesses are performing well. I think part of the issue is that we kind of lump all businesses together. If you were to separate businesses, so again, let's go back to the S&P 500. 76% of the debt in S&P 500 companies is long-term debt. That's debt that they're not necessarily going to have to refinance or recapitalize over the next couple of years. So S&P 500 type companies are in a good position. Problem is, they make up a small percentage of the total employees in this country. If you look at the smaller businesses, if you look at the tech businesses, you look at the mom and pop businesses, you look at the larger mid-sized businesses that aren't necessarily publicly traded, that makes up the bulk of the employees in this country, and those businesses are about to get crushed. Those businesses are starting to have to refinance this debt at much higher rates than they were able to do. And when you refinance at higher rates, you have less money to spend. On average, for every extra dollar in interest cost, that a business has to spend, that's 10 to 20% less in CapEx that they spend. Which means for every dollar that goes out in extra interest, that's businesses that aren't expanding, that aren't hiring more employees, that aren't buying more machinery, that aren't buying more equipment, that aren't buying more factories. And at some point, and again, we're talking $2 trillion over the next year and a half, 2 years, at some point, businesses are going to have to make this hard decision. Am I going to keep all these employees that I have?
Right. At some point, though, we've been saying this for 6 months. Like, what's that point? And every single time we come up with new data, jobs are resilient.
It's
there's
because
always
for the past 5 years, these businesses have been borrowing at 0%. They've gotten free money,
so much cash,
and it's just like real estate. Let's use the real estate analogy. Yeah, all real estate investors were doing fine through this year, maybe even the beginning of next year, because we all got debt at like 2-3% for 3 or 4 years. Well, it's now been 2, 3, 4 years since interest rates were low, and we all have to refinance this debt. And so we're going to hit a wall. We're going to hit a cliff where all this debt that was at 0% or 2% or 4% is now being refinanced or recapitalized at 6, 8, 10, 12%. And that's a wall that's going to just crush us.
Well, the credit cards are an interesting thing looking at the individuals. The businesses have huge cash. So you have like perfect example is even like the REITs. It was extra 2 years ago. They pulled out $1 billion at like 2% just to have cash on hand, right? They were just pulling money out and they're like, we can sit on it because it's so low. So they have all these cash reserves. And Americans, they did the same. 2 years ago, we had the highest cash because they had jobs, they weren't working, they weren't spending because of COVID, and the government was paying them as well. It was a huge cash bucket. They've been burning them.
Companies were even taking out debt to buy back their own stock.
Yeah.
We think of rising interest rates as having this linear effect. We raise rates a little bit today and things get a little worse tomorrow. We raise them a little tomorrow. A lot of these things, they pile up until we hit a wall or a cliff and we see a collapse. And corporate debt is one of those examples where all these rate increases, they've had zero impact for the last year and a half because none of this debt or very little of this debt has come due in the last year and a half. But after 2 or 3 or 4 years, the typical time frame of this short-term debt, that's when it's all going to start coming due at not a little bit higher rates, but much higher rates. And so
outside working capital, like working capital companies, that's why when you look at private equity and technology, those were cash burning machines.
Yep.
So even if you look, there's a site that aggregates all the SEC filings every single month. Now I look at it for California and I get the data because in the SEC filings for the publicly traded companies, they have to list out layoffs, right? So you can actually get kind of a viewpoint on jobs reporting before it comes out by aggregating the filings. Now, California is what I was looking at. It's totally skewed because it's so heavy in technology. But in October for 2023, the reports for layoffs and job loss were double anything they've seen in the highest point in the last 2-3 years.
The tech industry right now is almost at a rebound. Like they had, like, if you look back at the beginning of last year, like they got crushed. The layoffs were massive. And I feel like, and I had the theory back then that we weren't seeing it in the unemployment reports, because if you look at all of these major tech companies, like they had layoff packages, right? Some of them were getting 6, 9, 12 months worth of severance pay for all these layoffs, but they already had like a tech recession.
And it's more than that. It doubled.
The layoffs we saw in the tech industry over the last 18 months have been proactive layoffs. They've been layoffs that have allowed companies, a lot of these tech companies are companies that get venture capital money, and typical cash infusion gives them a runway, gives them about a 2 years worth of operating capital before they have to raise money again. And so about a year and a half ago, a lot of these companies thought, oh no, I may not be able to raise money anytime soon. And so what they did was they started doing these proactive layoffs that would take that 2-year runway, basically that 2 years worth of capital, and extend it 6 months or 12 months or 24 months.
Survive to 25.
So exactly. And a lot of people were using that terminology in the real estate world now, survive to 25, but that came from the tech world last year. Last year, basically, they were talking about the fact that we needed to extend runways for this operating capital through 2025. And so there were a lot of proactive layoffs last year that would allow these companies to extend. The problem is, if we don't see that rebound by 2025, it's not going to be a small number of layoffs to extend capital again. It's going to be businesses going out of business and doing 100% layoffs, everybody losing their jobs. And so I think what we could potentially see, and I don't think it's a foregone conclusion, maybe things will rebound, maybe venture capitalists will start investing again before 2025. But if we don't see this rebound in equity investments and cost of debt in the next year, I suspect we're going to see a whole lot of corporate defaults. I think we're going to see a whole lot of bankruptcies. I mean, we're at the highest level of corporate defaults on debt now than we have been since December 2007.
Yeah, and Jay, the concern on this debt thing as well is, like you mentioned it earlier. I'm looking at it right now. The 10 years up to 4.85. But if you look at the 10-year, from October of last year to the beginning of this year, it was actually going down, right? So as the Fed was raising rates, the 10-year was actually going down. So the Fed was trying to actually slow things down, but the 10-year wasn't listening. So some of the borrowing costs have been going up, yes. But now that the Fed is slowing down their increases, the 10-year is freaking taking off. And that's concerning too, because that's going to also affect the continuing increase of these interest rates for these businesses. And the Fed has even come out and saying, look, the 10-year is doing the job for us. Like, I think 3 Fed officials now have come out over the last week saying, we may not have to raise any more. I know they're predicting one more raise for the end of the year, but we may not have to raise any more interest rates because the 10-year is doing sort of the dirty work for us. The problem is they don't have that much control over the 10-year, and so it's not unfathomable that this may hit 5, 5.5. It could just kind of spiral out of control, which is one of the problems that the Fed has. The Fed thinks it's controlling stuff. It really only controls the short end, right? The overnight. That's really what it controls, is the overnight rate. But you and I don't get affected too much by the overnight rate. We're much more affected by a 10-year. And if this 10-year keeps creeping up, that's going to be a concern. And even if now the Fed tries to stop or reverse a little bit, if this 10-year still keeps going up, and remember, we talk about this all the time, the 10-year Treasury market is the deepest market in the world. It's not a U.S. market. It's not just based on buying and selling here in the U.S. It's based on buying and selling in the entire world. So even the Fed has limited influence over the long end of the curve because, again, it's Germany's trading it, Europe's trading it, pension funds in other countries are trading it. So you really got to keep an eye on the 4.85. I'm just trying to figure out, what's the reason for this? Obviously, they're selling bonds, and why are they selling bonds? Is there an expectation? Usually, the 10 years a growth and expectation metric. So people are now, the market anyway, the bond market is expecting more growth, maybe because of this consumer spending thing. Which, by the way, just so it's clear, and I don't want to sound like the perma, downer, that report, just so that everybody knows, is not adjusted for inflation. Right. So it doesn't, some of that, not all of it, some of that has to do simply by prices going up higher. So people are spending more, not because they're spending more or buying more items. It's just that the prices that they're paying for the same items they were buying a year ago is actually higher. So it's not adjusted for inflation. So that number is a little bit skewed, but it's interesting to see, these data points. And you could definitely argue both ways that, hey, we have a really strong economy. Look at the consumer spending more. But on the flip side, you got the businesses struggling. So it's a little bit of a head scratcher to try and figure out what exactly is going on.
All right. I think we've talked enough about this. I'm depressed enough about it.
Well, here's the thing. Let me sum this up, because I think a big question after all this discussion is, does this mean necessarily that we're going to see another rate hike because now everybody's concerned about inflation not being under control, and things kind of going sideways? But the reality is that if you look at, and let me bring up here, the current likelihood of a rate hike come the next Fed meeting, which is 2 weeks from tomorrow, or 2 weeks from the day this comes out, there's a 91% chance factored in by the market.
Hit refresh, Jay. I don't know what just happened in the last 10 minutes, but it went down to 87.9.
Did it really? Okay.
Yeah.
I brought that literally. That's so funny. I brought this chart up literally like within the last 5 minutes, and it looks like it's dropped 4% in the last 5 minutes. So yeah, so here we are at 87.9% chance, and I guess maybe we'll keep watching this through the rest of the taping of this episode. But there's still a significant significant chance that the Fed is not going to raise rates. And now we can always say, hey, this number doesn't necessarily mean they're not going to raise rates. This is just a guess. But the reality is the Fed does not like to surprise the market. They know that's the scariest thing. And that's the thing that can really hurt the economy, is if they surprise the market. So as long as the market believes there's an 88% chance that there's not going to be a hike in 2 weeks, I'd say there's a really, really good chance that there's not going to be a hike in 2 weeks.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm half blind, but this, just so people that are not watching, this is a graph that shows the target rate probabilities for a hike, right? Because if you look at the dot plot from the Fed itself, the dot plots are expecting one more.
Yeah, this is what the market expects. This has nothing to do with what the Fed is saying.
Correct,
So
but that's an 87 chance that they will increase, not that they won't.
No. That's the current rate right here.
Got it. So the 87, that's why I'm saying it's kind of small on my screen. So that's showing an 87% chance that there's no rate increase?
Correct. For the next one. Then you can go out to the December, as Kyle just pointed out, and this is the December, basically the market's assumption of what's going to happen in December. In December, things are very different. So in December, basically, there's a 57, as of today, a 57% chance of no rate hike, but a 38% chance of a 0.25% hike, and a 4% chance right now of a half point hike. So December, obviously, the market's not nearly as optimistic. But again, that goes back to the fact that the market knows that if the Fed were planning to hike rates in 2 weeks, we probably would already have a good indication of that by now.
But if you keep going, to future months, basically the market believes we're done. If you want to take the majority, the market believes that we're done. It's funny. You have to go out to basically you have to go out to March of next year before the market believes there's more than a 0% chance of a rate cut. But it believes we're done hiking, though.
It believes there's a likelihood, not necessarily a certainty, but a likelihood that we're done.
Two-thirds likelihood, basically.
57%.
I mean, yeah, fair enough. That's not quite two-thirds. You're right, but
a little over a half. So yeah, I mean, it's the odds-on favorite of no cut or no hike again by the end of the year, but far from certain. And I'm going to assume that at this point that the Fed is truly data-driven, as they say they are, which means we'll have a lot more information about December over the next month and a half of data releases.
And I think it is going to depend on this 10-year. I mean, if this 10-year creeps up and crosses 5, and then I think the odds of an increase are lower. Just like, I mean, they're coming out. That's what the Feds are speaking of. They're saying, hey, this is doing the work for us. We may be done. They're still saying one more, but they're starting to sound a little bit like softer on that commitment.
But once again, this is all based off of everyone assuming there's not going to be a recession. Nothing's going to break.
100%.
This is all like soft landing achieved, and I still don't believe that. I'm
running out of time though. I said October at the latest. So I've only got 2 weeks left before something has to happen.
Well, I think it's Q1, but yeah, we already broke the banking system. They basically put a Band-Aid on it. And that,
yeah, but I know we haven't talked about it. I know we're not going to talk. Maybe we can talk about it next week. But I mean, we talk about black swan events. You're talking about what's going on geopolitically. But let's skip that one for next week.
For sure. All right, let's move on to AJ's topic. AJ suggested a topic, and it was pretty.
I didn't really look. He suggested underwater basket weaving, and I'm like, I don't know if that's really going to be a good one for this week. So we made him change it.
You guys don't like underwater basket weaving. You guys don't like yoga with goats. You guys don't like. You guys deny all my.
I think those are all courses at Boise State, aren't they, AJ? But
I sell those courses.
All right. Well, AJ really wanted to talk about this, so it's my job to spin this into something that's remotely related to real estate and not just a political commentary. So here's my attempt. News has come out that New York City is now caring for 60,000 asylum seekers just in the city alone, and they've all arrived from Texas. As a result, the city has inked a deal with over 100 hotel providers to provide shelter, and the deal is estimated to cost $1.365 billion with a B dollars just with the hotels. How'd I do there? This hotels, shelter, that's real estate, right?
Everything about immigration is real estate.
So usually I start off the segment with a question, but it doesn't really matter what I ask AJ. He's just going to start rattling off pages and pages of stats. And, he's got this whole thing. His assistant probably came up with 4 pages of stats that he's going to rattle off right now. So just take the floor, AJ, and start going.
Thank you. So let me start out by the Libertarian National Convention. No, I'm just kidding. So first of all, this shouldn't be a political issue, but everything is political in today's age. And I can't think of hardly anything outside of birth rates that affect housing and the economy more, especially in the United States, than immigration. Immigration is the main driver in the United States for population growth. And it has different effects because it is not a evenly distributed thing, unlike things like birth rate, which will vary from state to state. But immigration is very concentrated, meaning the vast majority of immigration that goes on will end up in 4 states, right? It'll end up in Texas, Florida, New York, and California.
Not Arizona?
No, not actually, not nearly as much. Interesting, right? So the reason why this is a big deal and why I wanted to talk about it, because I think it's so important. First of all, yes, it's become a big political thing because of the debate overall in the United States, where you have generally the only reason I think it is political is because the 2 red states that are getting all the immigrants are the ones that are saying, hey, we've got a problem and we need help, and this is a big problem. And then it became political because the blue state said it's not, and you should accept everybody. We'll be sanctuary cities. So they put them on buses and sent them there. Said, you can take care of them. We already said we can't unless we get assistance. Now the cities of New York and Chicago that were arguing with the red states, saying they were making it an absurd crisis, they have now declared emergency. They're needing federal funding. That's already gotten over 900 million from Biden, and he's already asked Congress to give another $600+ million to these cities, as well as their own funding and everything in need. It is changing the landscape of a lot of states and metropolitan area. But to understand, before we get into how much it's changing, I want to kind of show the landscape of all. I don't ever hear people talking real numbers because it becomes a political thing, which it shouldn't be. This is a real thing that we're dealing with. And the numbers, first of all, are staggering. So let's put it into context. If you look at the whole world all together, the United States makes up the vast majority, not only in terms of people living that are immigrants, but immigrants coming to. In fact, it is so big that if you took the next 4 countries and combined them that have the highest influx of immigration, they do not reach the United States level. We blow the whole world out of the water when it comes to immigration.
Well, given that I think, less than 1% of the population in this country is not immigrants?
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. We're all immigrants.
We're all immigrants, right? It is, and we have the most liberal immigration policy of any major first world country or second world country. So, in fact, most first world countries do not really allow immigrants to come in. They don't just nationalize them.
I feel like Canada's pretty bad, too.
But here's the thing.
Allowing people to come in?
Yeah.
But here's the thing. We're mixing right now, I assume, legal and illegal immigration. I don't think it's contentious that the U.S. over the last 200 years has had one of the most liberal policies toward immigration in the world. That's by design.
Yes.
I mean, go to Ellis Island and read. I mean, that's been the whole point. So I don't think we're disagreeing.
No, I don't think it's bad.
Yeah.
That's why people are coming here.
Yeah.
That's why
I just want to make it clear. I don't think any of us are agreeing that liberal immigration, legal immigration is a bad thing.
No, please, actually, we need it because our birth rate's falling.
100%.
So when you look at the numbers, immigrants that are so the United States is 5% of the world's population. but it represents over 25% of all immigrant residents in the world. So over 50 immigrants alone in 2021 came in.
50,000?
50 million.
50 million. 50
That
million?
Had come into the United States. Since 2021, immigrants comprised over 15% of the total population of it. Now, to be clear, we're not talking about children of immigrants, anything else. We're talking about people that didn't live here, came and immigrated over here. So that's, and like Jay said, you're talking about, you just go back 1 or 2 generations, that's huge. That's like 50% of the population. And these numbers of late have skyrocketed. So if you look at, January 2023, we opened up some fairly big things for Cuba, as well as Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela, that we gave humanitarian programs to help them and help them come here. And those things started the big caravans that we've seen, and we've seen them coming in. The origins, which the vast majority are from Mexico, but I don't believe that. I think the vast majority are coming through Mexico, but that's neither here nor there. Now, the top states, of course, are New York, Texas, Florida. We already talked about that. The sanctuary cities, though, are not wide like that. Sanctuary cities include Chicago, San Francisco, New York, Washington, D.C., and San Jose, California.
So for those who are listening that don't know what a sanctuary city is, can you give us a...
Yes, a sanctuary city really actually doesn't mean a whole lot, but it does require the city to provide services. So when they say we're a sanctuary city, the laws are saying that if you come here, we are forced to provide you with basic services. Those services are equal to New York alone is spending over $10 million a day to house and feed the new immigrants coming in. And it's one of the reasons why they're claiming a state of emergency. They're like, we don't have the funds, we don't have the space. They're really not sure what to do right at this point.
Well, it's expected to cost them $4.7 billion.
Yeah.
Can they just unsanctuary it?
No. So so New York's trying to right now. And the problem is, I mean, it's a democratic state. And so the problem is all these social programs and social advocates and all these things, they fight them. And so like you have some group that advocates for homeless people. You have a group that advocates for, this, that, and the other. If they overturn these laws, then they will be affected. Those groups will be affected. So they all come out and they advocate and they run them through the courts. And so they can't get it changed.
Well, you also have to remember, New York and Chicago ran on campaigns saying that Florida and Texas were racist because they did not want to provide all these services. So it's a huge political bundle that people are sitting here going, no, we said that this was racist and this was bad. We have to give these services. So they're kind of stuck politically. Politicians are in this weird spot where they go, we know we can't handle it. We know it's not feasible. But we built literally whole campaigns and we got elected over this idea on how we should treat people. And now they're faced with really bad.
Oh, they're backpedaling though. If you look at Hochul from New York, like she originally was like, we will provide shelter for everybody. Well, like it was kind of like a talking point where she was like, oh, we're going to give everyone hotel rooms. We're going to do all that stuff. And so that was back in like December of last year. And now she's literally coming out and saying, don't come. She's like, we are full. If you are looking for a place to come to, it's not New York. You have to go somewhere else. And literally like complete 180.
1,000 people in the last year into just that city. Those are shocking numbers. Yeah. And it's
by the way, this is why I always hate politicians, right? Because it's all theory, it's all talking points, it's all this, that, the other. I don't even believe half of them believe what they're saying. They just want to get elected to get the right point. And so now that you have the reality of whatever's happening, well, then they have to backpedal. It's like, oh crap, I didn't. And it's not just this issue; it's every issue out there, even with business and finances and everything. They have no idea what they're. Anyway, that was just my rant on politicians.
Too, but they made it so like we shouldn't talk about it. So that was the big problem, was they basically said, you're saying there's a crisis, there's not, and the fact that you are saying it is because you're trying to stir up problems, and frankly, it's racist and you can't talk about it. So then nobody did. The Biden administration literally ran on this idea, and President Biden came out multiple times saying there is no crisis. This is completely manufactured, right? And you're right. The politicians, instead of just saying, hey, guys, this is a United States issue. We need to care for these people. We need to figure out ways to make sure they're safe. We need to make sure these people are going to places where they should be going. We're not losing children. Families aren't being separated. Like, we need to tackle these issues. And until the last couple months, it hasn't even really been tackled. And it's changing the landscape of a lot of these cities fundamentally.
Well, because it always shifts, right? So someone will bring up that issue of, okay, we need to care for these people, but then the next politician is going to shift the discussion to, okay, we need a stronger border wall. And then the next politician is going to shift to, that's not the real issue. The real issue is just our immigration policy in general, which in my opinion is the real issue. So like it's impossible to get 50 senators or 250 Congress people all to, on the same page.
Yeah.
And AJ, do you have any, because this is like, again, this to AJ's point, this shouldn't be a political discussion, and this is certainly not a political discussion. I mean, you talked about this being a United States issue, which is completely true. But I have a question for you. I'll give you my statement and then I'll give a question for you. But I mean, I absolutely love this concept of, hey, we've got a problem, this is affecting us, Texas, Florida, New York, all these people. And then everybody else saying, hey, whatever, you're racist, you're this, you're that, we're not going to think about it. And they start busing these people. So when they come in across the border, instead of making it a border issue, they now put it into Maine, US, and now everybody starts feeling the pain of what that really sounds like. So I just love that idea and concept. Again, not political, whether it's a green thing. So the question I have is, do you know what ballpark? Do you have any idea what? Because you're busting these people out, it's got to be a really small percentage of the overall problem, and yet it's causing so many issues for New York. But I got to imagine they can't be sending more than 1% or 2% or 5% of the people crossing, or is it a bigger number?
Millions of people are coming over.
No, I know, but how many of those millions are then getting sent to New York?
Only 150,000 people got sent to New York. That's it.
Right.
150,000 people.
So like 10% or 5 or 10%.
Look, let me start with, it's funny, people always kind of speculate where I am on the political spectrum. Socially, I'm very liberal. From my perspective, I see nothing wrong with doing everything we can to take care of people that need to be taken care of. That said, I'm also a realist. I'm a pragmatist, and I stop at everything we can. We shouldn't be doing things that hurt this country, that hurt our citizens, that hurt the world. And so AJ and I were having a conversation while we were walking this morning, not about this topic at all, but we were talking just about how one of the big problems we see in the world is there's this kind of, we have this first level thinking about issues and problems, and we tend not to go deep enough. And so we see it in the real estate world. Somebody will come up to me and say, they're not an experienced real estate investor. They'll come up to me and they'll say, hey, I was driving by this property and it's $3 million for like 80 units. And that seems like a great price. I want to buy it. What can I do to buy it? And it's that first order of thinking, like they're looking at 80 units for $3 million. Sounds like a great deal. But I think anybody that's actually invested in real estate knows that there's probably a whole lot more to it than just you look at 80 units for $3 million. And it's probably not a good deal just because it's a cheap deal. And unfortunately, I think for too many of the problems that we look at in this world, we have that first order level of thinking where we have this gut reaction. And the gut reaction is so polarized these days. It's either we need to help all these people that need help, full stop. Or this is America, we need to take care of Americans first, screw everybody else, full stop. And the reality is most Americans are going to be somewhere in the middle. Most Americans are going to be more common sense that we need to help people as much as possible. It's the right thing to do without risking the security of our country, without risking the economic viability of our country, without risking things like education and jobs and economy and all those things. And so I think this really boils down to we need that second order level of thinking, that third order level of thinking. We need people that can actually dig into these problems, and we don't have that. What we have is politicians on both sides that give us sound bites, gets us feeling like we know everything there is to know about this issue, and then we have nobody to dig in. And I think the place we should be spending money, and I think this should be a bipartisan issue, is we should be spending money on think tanks and organizations that can really figure out how to create a 10, 20, 30-year solution to this problem, as opposed to trying to create a one, and I'm not saying a one-year solution is bad. We can talk about whether we should be building a wall. We can talk about whether we should be putting the National Guard down at the border. We can talk about whether we should be letting illegal immigrants in and giving them Social Security numbers and putting them to work and helping them pay taxes. We can talk about those things, but we shouldn't stop there, because when you stop there, all you end up with is Band-Aids. You end up with Band-Aid fixes that tend not to work, because you can't put a Band-Aid on an amputated leg. I mean, this is a gaping wound, and a Band-Aid's not going to work, and we need to have some really smart people that can figure out a 10, 20, 30-year solution to the problem, even if it is a $1 trillion issue or a $2 trillion or a $5 trillion issue. Because here's the thing. Over the next 10 or 20 years, if we don't spend $1 trillion or $2 or $5 trillion on this issue, it's going to end up costing us 20 or 30 trillion.
Yeah, but the reality is, the challenges, of course, is just it is what it is, right? It's just our system, right? I mean, you've got politicians who are only there for a certain amount of time.
It's the system.
Yeah.
But it is, though. I mean, like let's just take the current president. Like, he's only around for a couple more years, whether it's 1 year or 5 more years. He doesn't care what's going to happen in 20 or 30 years. Politicians just want to get reelected. Like, the people in New York are flipping. They're just flipping because now they're like, crap, now these people are really hurting. And if I don't change my position, I'm going to get voted out next year when it's election time. So every politician is just looking for, how do I get reelected for the next time? And putting resources into something 30 years from now doesn't help them get reelected.
But isn't that kind of how it should work, though? Like, granted,
I'm not saying it shouldn't work. I'm just saying that's what it is.
So I know, but so yes, we should, as intelligent people, be saying, okay, we should be looking, we all have kids, and like we want to look 20, 30 years down the road. But politicians should just be representative of the people, right? And just what the people want. And I think the fact is that the majority of people, they don't look 20, 30 years down the road. They only look a month down the road. They live paycheck to paycheck. They just worry about what's the next paycheck is. And, we have this woke movement too. So that's what people worry about. So that's what politicians care about. And they're just kind of a microcosm of what the people are. And so that's
also, too, to that point, Kyle, if it doesn't affect me in that moment, I'm okay with it, but also too, I can do I can do my heart over the reality of somebody else, meaning this, and we all do this, meaning it's not affecting me, and you have to deal with the problem, but I think you're mean the way you're doing it. You shouldn't deal with it. And then you ask, well, how should we deal with it? Oh, I don't know. It's not my problem. I don't have the effects of it. And we see this in immigration. The places that have the effects, which are, you're talking about 11 million people in the United States today. 11 million are not citizens, and they're just here, and that's in a very short period of time. The people that aren't affected with it are like, well, why is that a problem? You should just deal with it, right? And the people that are affected with it are like, you got to do something. You got to help us. You got to kick them out. And so we don't look at even as it's a momentary thing, but it's also a momentary thing within my realm of impact. And that's why I think the buses is the best solution.
That's why the buses are great. They should, and I think they should take that to a step further. They shouldn't send 150,000 to New York. They should send 20,000 to New York and 20 to Idaho, and they should put some down in your back, the back of your beautiful home there, AJ. Put them in the back of your hill.
It has to be sanctuary cities is the problem, because if they ship them to Boise, Idaho doesn't have isn't a sanctuary city, and they'll just be like, nope, we don't want them, and they'll ship them right back. So like it has to be a place like New York City.
That's going to affect them. Shipping them right back is costly. Like, you got to deal with them at the moment. In the moment,
not as costly as keeping them.
Well, another thing though that we forget is a lot of this, you guys, we think that, okay, this is just people coming from South America, but that's actually not true at all. In fact, this year, you mean
Central? Probably Central America is what you mean. Most of them are Central America.
Well, Central and South America, because Venezuela We have a lot of people that have been coming up from Venezuela. But in the first 8 months of 2023, 43% of all people that came across the border were from Africa, the Middle East, East Asia. So the Middle East and Africa made up actually some of the largest majority of the people coming in. And guess where they're coming from? Mexico. They're coming up from the south of the border. So
you know what the problem is?
Huh?
You know what the problem is? TikTok.
I agree.
No, and you guys are laughing like I'm joking. I'm serious. And it's not just TikTok, but it's social media. The difference that's happening right now is it's too easy to claim asylum for the US. And the problem is TikTok and these social media. Everybody knows the exact script to say when you show up at the border and the border agent says, "Hey, what are you doing here?" They know I say this, and this, and that the U.S. has to take them. So
the page is training people how to do it on social media.
Exactly. So the problem is we're the best country in the world. Everyone wants to be here. So if everyone had now I shouldn't say everyone, but there's a big majority of the world would prefer to live in the United States if they had the opportunity. And someone puts a script on TikTok, it says, if you want to live in the United States, this is all you got to say. And the problem is we don't have a system to deal with that. There's no checks and balances of saying, hey, do you really need asylum? Like, do you really fit this criteria? No, they just ask them a bunch of questions. Oh, okay, you're in the country. Here's your date. Here's your hearing date for, whenever, a year from now. Go live in a hotel room in New York City and please show up to your hearing.
And two, you mentioned a good point. Do you need it? Meaning this, just because you say it's better there does not mean you're a refugee. So people are like, oh, well, yeah, you go to Central America and their lives aren't as good. They're migrating here to escape these bad places. That is not what a refugee is. If that was the case, we would have 5 billion people that would be refugees coming to the United States, right? And so you're right, Kyle. They know what to say. They're claiming asylum. They're acting like refugees, but they're not. They're not refugees. And once again, I have no problem with immigration. None whatsoever. But we, just like all of us citizens, have to do all the things, pay taxes, we have to go through the loopholes, we have to sit in the DMV, which is really annoying, right? We got to do all this crap. And we just want everybody to come here and be the same and do the same thing. So we are all participating in a larger thing together. We're helping each other. We're all participating. We're trying to do what's right. There's nothing wrong with that at all. That is amazing. That's what makes America, America. But the guise of these are refugees is not true.
I think, let me just sum this up, that we're having this big discussion and I don't think anybody has a solution to propose. I think the most important thing is we identify the problem, and there are a lot of problems here, but for me, the biggest problem is that the organization that's entrusted to solve this issue is Congress. I mean, along with the president, let's be clear, the president has some responsibility, but at the end of the day, the president doesn't pass legislation, the president doesn't allocate funds to solve problems, and we have a Congress that for 4 years couldn't be bothered to do anything because they were busy investigating a president. We have a Congress now that a House that can't even agree on who should be the leader of their party. Yeah. They can't govern their own party, and would rather show pictures of Hunter Biden junk in Congress. I mean, it's basically two parties that are a bunch of children that don't want to tackle the hard issues because, in my opinion, they realize that if they try and tackle these issues, they're not going to have a solution. It's going to make them look bad. Yeah. So it's easier not. It's like me in college. If I don't want to study for a test because I think I'm going to fail, it's easier just not to study. And that's what these guys are doing. They're just they don't want to look bad by failing to come up with a solution. So they don't even talk about the problem except for sound bites.
It's become a state thing. It really has. The states are left up to it. We're building the wall again, which is crazy because they sold parts on pennies of the dollar, of which now they are rebuying at a premium to try to finish up this wall and build it up. And then we're talking about security and all sorts of things like that going on with it. But we have this huge issue where the states are now left in charge. The federal government is basically acting as a political branch, meaning we don't want to talk about the wall, but we're finishing it, right? Now I want to help New York, so we're sending them money. So there isn't a conservative federal at all effort. So the states being left to figure it out is really bad because it is not a state problem. And that's what we're finding out. And I think that the states, as we move through this and go, especially Texas, Florida, California, the decisions that they make individually is going to vastly shape for everyone else how immigration in the United States is going to play out. And if you are in a city where they're shipping refugees to you, right, it will fundamentally change everything. The economics of the location, it's going to change the real estate. And these are vast, I mean, who here is investing in Texas or wants to invest in Texas, right? I mean, we're talking California, New York, Florida, and Texas.
Okay. At the end of the day, my recommendation is every 2, 4, and 6 years, vote out every incumbent forever until somebody comes in and figures out, like, at least starts to address the problem. Because literally, it's the only thing, we can talk about it all day, but there's only one group of people in this country that can do anything about it, and they don't seem to.
Well, you can elect local officials, though. I think
but
that's
local
a really
officials,
important thing.
but this is a federal problem. I'm not saying there aren't state issues, but from the state's point of view, it's like, let's just try and compensate and survive.
That is right.
But we have to solve this at a federal level.
Education does get you there. You can, as I said before, these politicians are just a vessel for the people. They just want to get reelected.
But if we're putting all our eggs in the education basket, well, then yeah, let's throw up our hands and just give up.
Well, no, when I say education, educating people what the issues are and what's actually going on. I'm not saying school education. I'm saying, like,
all we can all do is have the discussion. If the problem is, no, we're not having discussions, right? This is now just becoming a discussion because we're dealing with these sanctuary cities. And I think it's shocking how many people don't understand, because you're right, it is a political thing. And like we were talking about earlier, we need to have more in-depth discussions on these things to understand the impact on all of us, because the people, like Kyle said, that we throw up there and represent, at the end of the day, they're going to do whatever we want. So hopefully more and more people continue talking about this, talk about it with families, talk about impact, and that we can have some change eventually.
Right. And people start caring about it, then they start talking about it in the news, and then that's how you affect change. So yes, we could say our politicians are awful, but at the end of the day, most of them, they don't have a actual thought in their brain that they're pushing on to Congress or to the Senate. They're just taking polls and saying, okay, where do the constituents lie on this? And this is how I'm going to vote, and I'm going to act like it's my idea. So that's, at the end of the day, it comes down to us.
Maybe you use the Warren Buffett, the Warren Buffett analogy about, term limits. It's like, hey, you just pass a law that says that no, until you get this thing solved, no politician is going to be eligible for re-election. You'd probably get this thing solved right away.
Yep, that's what I said. Every 2, 4, 6 years, vote out the incumbents until somebody fixes it.
I don't know if because then people then they're only thinking 2, 4 years in the future, and that's, I don't think that's the right way
and not to pick on Idaho, but like if you're in Idaho and it doesn't affect you, this is not an issue for you. That's the whole point, right? Like, why would I vote? Why would I vote people in to fix something that's not my problem?
All right, we got a little long here, so you guys good with me skipping right to the top 10 here?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah. Good. We'll push our other topic to the next week. All right, perfect. So the top 10, I thought, in the spirit of you guys being in Orlando for your conference, I thought I would do the top 10 meeting and event destinations. Since we're thinking, we're talking about next year, maybe Cancun. Vegas is obviously a big spot.
Like what we think is the top 10?
No. This was put on by CVent, and this was based off of actual data of the number of other people. So when I say top, I'm not saying the top, like this is where I want to go. This is where most people go to events. So anyone want to take a stab at number one?
Baby, Vegas.
Vegas is number 3.
Are we talking U.S. only, or are we talking the world?
Yeah, U.S. only. Vegas is number 3. So anyone
is Orlando 1 or 2?
Orlando is number 1.
Yep.
No.
I
There goes
bet
the hat.
still-
There goes the hat. Wait, there goes the hat, everyone.
So Orlando-
Everybody, there goes the hat. There goes the
Orlando is
hat.
number 1. Washington, D.C. is number 2.
For events?
What?
I guess so. There's a lot of politics, I guess, political events. And
Have you guys
and
ever
whatnot.
been to an event in DC?
No.
Yeah, so I think events is like we're thinking like major, like thousands of people. I think this includes like smaller meeting type events. It's just scheduled events nationally.
San Diego.
So then number 4 is Miami, Florida. So Florida 2 in the top 5. Number 5 is Chicago. 6 San Diego. 7 Phoenix. 8 Atlanta. 9 Dallas. 10 New Orleans.
Hey, Kyle, is there a reason why the hat went around and the hoodie went on? Like, is it getting cold over there? What's going on?
We're up in the Northeast. It's getting a little chilly these days. Yeah. I wanted to show off my bar down investments hoodies, and my wife says we don't advertise enough on these podcasts. So I gotta show it off.
You gotta start spending some money and start sponsoring this podcast. Jeez.
Well, we already have 2 members on here. I figured I'd just get enough natural push from it anyway. All right, let's
By the way,
finish.
that's your plug. You don't get another plug at the end of the show.
I'm always going to plug Ashley daily. I plug Ashley whenever she lets me. So let's go to the game here. Once again, this is going to be conference based because I looked up, or now the BiggerPockets conference. I know you guys are speakers, so you don't have to pay for it, but BiggerPockets conference for 4 figures just to attend. Now it's a minimum $1,000 if you want a VIP ticket. It's even more than that, plus hotel rooms, plus all this stuff. So it's not cheap. So I started to think to myself, and I talked about this with Jay before. If you had $5,000 to spend on like real estate education, where would you put your money? And the 3 options are: would you attend conferences? So that's at this point, that's only maybe 2, maybe 3 conferences to attend. Would you join a mastermind group, which running price of a mastermind group's right around $5,000 these days? Or would you join some sort of mentorship program where there's they kind of teach you the ropes for real estate? I'll start with Mauricio there. Where would you say people should go?
I would do depending on if it's the right one, I would probably do a mastermind that's run by people that I really respect and want to pick their brains and have an opportunity to ask them questions directly.
Absolutely, some kind of group mastermind where I actually am making connections, learning from other people that are doing. Because I like conventions, but it's from the networking side where I can meet people and actually do something after. Take that to actually do something. And I think masterminds are better. It's more intimate. You're with the other people that are doing it, so you can actually create opportunities.
As per usual, I can't give a simple answer. It's just not in my my DNA. So if it's somebody that has done no real estate before, if you don't know what type of investing you want to do, you don't know what different options are out there, basically you're a newbie, I highly recommend starting with conferences because it's a great place to network with people that do lots of different things, so you can kind of narrow down what it is, what strategy you want to pursue, what asset class you want to pursue. If you've figured out an asset class or a strategy, if you kind of know what you want to do, but you need help getting started, I think that's kind of the point where you reach out for a mastermind. You find people that are specialized in that one particular area, that are already doing it, that are successful at doing it, and you kind of get moving and get your start. Once you've gained a little bit of traction, once you actually,
Oh my God! I thought was this a yes or no answer? What is like a speech right now? What's
told
going
you
on?
I can't give a simple answer.
Jeez.
I'm educating people. Education, free education. After that, yeah. Once you're doing what you want to be doing,
So let me get this straight. So you've done all the conferences and you've spent your $5,000. So now you have no money, and so then you go to the mentorship, but then the mastermind's like another $5,000, but you're already out of money because you listen to Jay and you spent all your money on conferences. Now you've got no money and you've learned nothing.
you spend $5,000 on your conferences. You make $5,000 from what you've learned. You spend that $5,000 on masterminds. Use that to make 50 grand, and you use that money to go to a mentorship.
By the way, I spend $5,000 just feeding Jay sushi when we hang out together. I mean, that's where my money goes.
That's your own fault, though. That's your own fault. When I take Jay out, we're much cheaper than what you do. You get the boat. If there's a boat on the sushi menu, Mauricio's ordering it.
Oh, trust me, I'm right with Mauricio, except he takes it to the next level. He was the guy that had to order the Wagyu sushi, the Wagyu beef sushi.
I like it.
Beef, that's not even sushi.
It is when you throw it on rice.
That's right.
Well, you put anything on rice, pepperoni on rice, that's sushi.
Well, you got to roll it up, too.
You can do the Wagyu, and that's even better is a foie gras. I really want to piss some people off. The foie gras sushi is even better.
Ashley's already dialing your number, telling you you're an awful person for eating foie gras. Jay, are you done? Can I answer now?
I don't care. I'm
I
done.
don't think you finished the last part, but I think we should cut him off.
I'm actually the opposite of Jay. I think you don't spend any money. Figure out what you want to do by reading books and stuff, and then once you figure out what you do, then you do mentorship. You're going to learn exactly what you want to do through a mentorship. Then you do the mastermind. So you you perfect your craft through the mastermind, meet other people who are doing good stuff, give you good ideas, perfect your business. And then finally you do the conferences.
AJ, what the hell's going on here, AJ? I mean, I got these two clowns like giving you a roadmap for 5K. They're giving you the roadmap to like.
I did it in 30 seconds. Jay can't do anything under 30 seconds. He couldn't even get the conferences out in 30 seconds.
My wife would argue with that.
All right, we'll end the segment on that. I don't think we can get a better ending than that one. Mauricio, you got anything you want to plug this week?
I'm going to continue to plug my Real Estate Syndicate Live on Mondays at 11:30. It's turned into like a little mastermind, FYI, but not for 5K. So just go to realestatesyndicatedlive.com. Join us. It's me and a bunch of syndicators, and we talk shop, legal, and whatever else is on your mind.
All right, AJ, you got something?
Yeah, I got something, and I'm not even supposed to talk about it. But I'm going to, as my people know. They tell me don't tell anybody this, and I always do. We're starting our partnership program. So we're starting a program to partner with people that are doing smaller deals, which we've always typically stayed away from because we haven't had systems or anything set up. But yeah, we're rolling that out first to like our community thing, but then we're trying to roll it out wide for everybody. So.
Partnership program to principally partner with people.
Yeah. AJ, you want to give your direct line phone number so they can call you directly and talk about the partnerships?
Yeah. Here, hold on. Let me get that.
Give him your lawyer's number, and we'll take care of it.
Exactly. Mauricio's phone's going to blow up.
Jay, what do you got to plug this week?
I finished. I think it's a little bit more than a glass of wine. There's my analysis.
So what's your plug?
What's my plug? Drunk real estate. I'm so annoyed. Like AJ and I did a panel yesterday in front of must have been 600 people.
Yeah.
Like there were 600 people in there, and I was just waiting for the moderator of the panel to like give us an opportunity to like, where can people get in touch with you? What should they know about you? So we could like be like, hey, if you want more of this discussion. And he never gave it to us, but
I slid one in.
He did.
I slid one in.
That's what she said.
Who was the moderator?
Paul Moore. Hi, Paul.
Paul Moore. Paul Moore. He's a smart guy. I don't know about it. Like typically, you just want the young, charismatic person who doesn't know a lot for the.
Are you saying Paul's not young and charismatic? He's definitely not young. Is he not charismatic?
Usually, you want Paul on the actual panel, dropping knowledge bombs. But,
it's the same one we did last year, and BiggerPockets. It was such a hit. The BiggerPockets, like, hey, we've got to do the exact same panel this year. Paul did a great job. It was a really good panel.
Yep.
I mean, they probably should have had Ashley on instead of Jay, but other than that, I'm sure it was great.
Zero doubt. Zero doubt.
Once again, I'm going to plug my wife, Ashley. Go follow her on Instagram, Badash Investor. She's at BiggerPockets too. So if you guys want to see all the parties that are going on, she seems like she's participating in a lot more parties than actual conference knowledge stuff. So if you want a little fun stuff, go follow her on that. All right, guys, I finished off my drink. I know Jay did he's got the giggle fest going on over there. So if you're at BiggerPockets, go find Jay, and hopefully he's kept the drinking going, and he seems like a good time. So
So last night we're going to Universal.
Universal Studios rented out the park.
well, have fun with that. For all of you guys and everybody else listening, I will see you next Tuesday.